So, in our brave new world, a man could wake up and decide he wants to identify as a woman. If then, as a woman, she commits a crime and is jailed, there's a very real possibility she'll soon be able to serve her time in a female prison, even if she still has male genitalia. Even more worrying, the prison's ombudsman estimates there are around 80 transgender prisoners in England and Wales, and research suggests up to 50 of these could be sex offenders. So far, so scary, but it gets worse. Next year, the government is expected to make changes to the Gender Recognition Act, allowing people to self-declare which gender they identify as without any medical diagnosis. Critics say it could prove to be a pervert's charter, leaving no safe place for women from people born male. Not in prisons, refuges, toilets, hostels, changing rooms or shower rooms. All a man has to do to gain access to these places is say he identifies as a woman. And women are worried about this. Trouble is, no one's listening to them. This PC lunacy isn't just wrong, it's downright dangerous.
Carole, I'm glad you raised this, even though we've done quite a lot of transgender topics lately. I think it's an important issue. And I've thought about what you're saying quite a lot. And I think you're right. There is something that is really worrying, and that is when people are shut down from the debate. So I know personally feminists who feel that they are not allowed to express some of their concerns about the rights of transgender people to enter formerly female-only spaces. And I think that is something that we need to talk about, because this isn't going to work unless everyone is comfortable with it. And the problem I think that I have, I was trying to work out what exactly is my problem with what you're saying. I think it's that within the transgender community, there is a very small hardcore of quite extreme and very vocal people who are making life difficult for the vast majority of transgender people who are not going to end up in prison, are not sex offenders, do not want to storm into female-only spaces, but just want to transition so that they can live the life they deserve. And that's the problem, really, because when we get alarmist about how this is going to affect us, it does have the potential to affect all trans people. And 5 trans women have killed themselves in male jails in the last years. This is a serious issue. So we do need to do something to make it easier for people to transition into the gender they feel they should have been assigned at birth. And I also don't think it's right to characterise this as just being able to wake up one day and change your gender. I think what they're talking about is something in between the current position, which is very difficult to have your gender recognised, and a position where people can find it more accessible. So I think that we need to be a bit measured in this debate.
You know as well as I do that the current law says that it's, you legally establish a change of gender over a 2-year period. And at the end of that period, you're giving a gender recognition certificate, which has been certified by a doctor and a panel of experts. I think that works really well. But the problem is, if you want to look into prisons, there's a woman called Davina Ayrton, who, when she was David, raped a 15-year-old girl. She wants to go into a women's-only prison. Now, if these laws are changed, it's very possible she will be, even with male genitalia. There's another woman called Jessica Winfield who, when she was Martin, committed a double rape. She has had the operation. She's in a prison, but she had to be moved for sexually assaulting the other women in the prison. A man in Scotland actually had to be moved out of prison entirely, still had male genitalia. This is very dangerous for women, and while trans women have their rights, so do biologically born women have their rights too.
Carole, can I just add to this debate? I think I see where you're coming from, and actually see where you're coming from, Afua, and the trans community is a community that I have a lot of empathy for. And I think actually what we need is we just need better laws around transitioning. So we need to have a safe space for those that identify...
We have a good law
around transitioning. So we need a better space around those that consider themselves as non-binary.
In a woman's jail, if we've got someone... I'm not suggesting he's
You're not hearing what I'm saying, Nick. What I'm saying is, for those that are in the transitional stage before they've actually had all of the operations...
Some of the men who've even had the operation are still committing sex crimes.
But let me finish. So my point is, at the moment, we have nothing to recognise those that are in transition or that consider themselves as non-binary. And if we did have that, we wouldn't have these issues.
Should it not just be?
Because for trans women, they do not feel safe in cisgender male prisons. They are treated differently.
Should it not be, June, that a person with a penis should not be allowed in any safe space.
But then
for
why
women.
would you have a problem with a space for those that are non-binary and are in a position of transitioning? Because then that would deal with your
about
issue.
Separate spaces for people in transition.
We're going
Totally.
to have trans-only jails.
Well, the thing is,
Or spaces within our prison system that recognises that. Why would you have a problem with that?
I'm not suggesting any of the people that we've just named would do this, but you can't be so blindingly naive as to assume that a male prisoner wouldn't actually fake a transition just to get into a female jail for possibly an easier life. But, please tell me that's occurred to you.
No, but if you're in a space of those that are transitioning, then that's not an issue, is it?
Would you answer the question?
You're not hearing what I'm saying.
But would you answer that question? Would you accept that someone who's a criminal
But it wouldn't happen because they wouldn't be in an only female space. They would be in a transitioning space, wouldn't they?
Everybody would agree that we need some kind of regime that protects women and protects trans people. I think everyone agrees on that, and that's why the very extreme
and understands
examples,
the process of trans as well.
Conning you.
Can I just, before Greg comes in, I know Greg wants to come in, but before he does, can I just show you what Justin Greening has said? Because, Carole, you mentioned that the current process works fine, and this is her explaining that she doesn't think it does.
At the moment, if you want to change your gender, it's a very complicated process. It's quite intrusive as well, and it's very bound up in going to see your GP and a whole medical process that then gets kicked off.
So there is a clear feeling. I mean, I've spoken to trans women who
have
explained that in order to transition, one of the perverse things is that you have to convince the doctor that you've been living, quote, as a woman. And that drives a lot of trans people into really regressive gender stereotypes. They feel they have to wear heels and dresses 24/7.
You're changing gender. It's a big thing. You should have doctors to
Gender is a social construct, and it's a spectrum.
Gender is a social construct. You're kidding.
Please tell me.
What sort of numbers do you think we're talking about?
Yeah, a very small minority.
Very small. And it seems to me I'm not going to be popular here, but as an issue, it is an issue, but it's not. This is about the third or the fourth time we've discussed it on this panel, and you do begin to wonder.
I'm boring, honey, but
well, I do think it's. I quite like. So I looked up what Theresa May said, right? Because
what did she say?
My idol. She said, "We're determined to eradicate homophobic and transphobic bullying,"
which is right.
We have laid out plans to reform the Gender Recognition Act, streamlining and demedicalising the process for changing gender, because being trans is not an illness and it should not be treated as such. Now, we'd all, I think, agree with that, wouldn't we? Yeah. So actually, what we're arguing about is actually on the edge, on the fringe of all this. It's not that coming from a Prime Minister is quite a major statement, really, compared to what it would have been 3 years ago. You wouldn't have heard that 3 years ago.
I get cross that women aren't being heard. You both know Linda Bellis, the left-wing thing. Yeah. She is in the process of being, she might be chucked out of the Labour Party, because she made a speech about this last week saying that feminists weren't being heard. Listen what she says. If transgender activists inadvertently propose things which are in their interest but against the interests of those of us who remain women, I am going to say so, and I'm going to say it without fear, because a lot of feminists are being silenced, and that's the point. And she also says, and when you're talking about danger, she and I didn't know this, but she says there's a fetish among heterosexual men who dress up as women and go into women's spaces, and she's saying that the new laws in this act could be a cover for them to do that. They just have to say, I identify as a woman, and they can go in there.
Well, clearly, no law's worth the paper it's written on if it can't protect women from that. And I agree. I am concerned. I've seen feminists that I admire be shut down for voicing their concerns. So I don't think that's healthy. But I also think that is not reflective of the majority of transgender people.
At all.
The majority of trans people are not trying to silence women and feminists who have concerns. It's a very small and very hardcore minority who are responsible for that, in my opinion.
But there are people who will abuse the changes in this law, not trans people.
But this is why
it can be addressed by factoring
in that transition period.